But then I see you smiling, all my hard work ain't worthwhile anymore. It's just a festering sore, and no amount of drinking milk is gonna calm it. Just drinking rum to block out some of you summertime. Or at least I try. And at least a generation later I'm still trying to ease my soul.
Bonjour.
Good afternoon, everybody. Welcome. We are going to have a round table in 2 languages, be a mixture of French and English. So if you wish, you can have headsets to get the translation into English.
And English. So if you want a real-time translation, there are earsets behind the booth over there. Alors, bienvenue.
So welcome. Introduction will be done in French. We are at the world scale, at least what I would call an immature market for skiing. We have over-matured markets. It means over the last decade there has been a sort of stagnation of ski consumption, and inside this market you can also see a drop in the number of introductions of initiation classes for children. You know, what we call these new classes, which existed almost everywhere for children, are also going down almost everywhere. So with a team of mountain planners, it was actually quite interesting to know how you can recruit new customers for skiing in the mountains. Well, most of the time you think of children, of course. But these new customers for skiing, it's a long-term challenge, of course, and should be taken at the scale of generation, which is something like 30 years. And when you look at the future in 30 years, there's 2 things which spring up. 2 important problems, like the aging of the population, namely in the Western world. We talk about France, Italy, Germany, Spain, Austria, Central Europe, and Netherlands, Belgium, UK, but also North America, United States, Canada, and even more Japan. And you see that the rate of birth is dropping, has been dropping over the last decade, meaning we have less and less young people. The other very strong issue, I would say, which is like a big elephant in the room, is of course climate change, global warming. And when you try to see what's going to happen in 30 years, it seems to be difficult to talk only about recruiting new customers, young children, for skiing. So we decided to broaden, to open the debate and talk also about young adults, even senior elderly people. We can, and also talk about summer in the mountains, because in some places there might be a shift to summer skiing. That's what we're going to talk about together today, where we see there will be very strong marketing action. There might be also innovation for what we call a total experience. And maybe we have to change the way we think we understand the customers and the people who go skiing. So we have quite a rich and diverse and even international speakers. Well, you have Yves Junot from the association, from Quebec Ski Areas Association. And I see that he's got fans in the room. We have Yoichi Goto from Japan, who founded Pioneer Work, which is a consulting agency on outdoor activity, marketing, and tourist development. We have Isabel Frosch, who teaches at the University Savoie Mont Blanc, specialized in the behavior of customers, mainly in the tourist area. We also have Ursula Weichselbauer-Nord, who comes from Austria, who created the agency Kids and Fun Consulting, which is exactly what she does, in fact. She works in the marketing for children and family. And Fabrice Pancook, who is here first as a chairman of Auvergne-Rhône-Alpes Tourism, which is a tourist promotion body of the region where we are, and who is also an elected representative and who is elected in what we call the parliament of the region of Auvergne-Rhône-Alpes. I mean that for the foreigners, so you have a more universal idea of what his role is. Now, if we want to talk even beyond skiing, we first start talking about skiing, of course. And we start with Yves Junot. Yves is the chairman of this association, Quebec Ski Areas Association, which accounts for something like about 75 ski resorts. He's been chairman since 2013. Before that, he worked in the ski resort, like in the one Mont Tremblant, which is maybe the best one known in Europe. And I think he's also got fans from Mont Tremblant ski resorts. Thanks for supporting him. And since 2013, he has been in charge of stimulating the skiing market in Quebec in order to attract new skiers, namely young people. And we start with that. So Yves is the only one who has a few slides, and we're going to show them. So just to give you an idea, Quebec is something like 8 million inhabitants. It's like the Auvergne-Rhône-Alpes region, almost the equivalent. It's like Switzerland, approximately. And it's like Austria, about the same size. The only difference in Quebec, the surface area is 300 times the one of Auvergne-Rhône-Alpes region, so much bigger. So Yves Junot, maybe you can start quickly to give us introduce the association, and then you talk about your project, a very sophisticated one for recruiting new skiing customers in Quebec. So good afternoon. Thank you for welcoming me. It's a great pleasure for me to be here today. And as you said, Willy, I represent 75 ski resorts through Quebec. We're a small non-profit organization with 19 permanent employees. And we have 1.4 million of skiers and snowboarders in Quebec, with an economic impact of $800 million. We have several initiatives in order to recruit new customers, skiing or snowboarding. As you say in France, snowboard. There's no discrimination in Quebec. Be it one sport or the other, both are welcome. And of course, before we had a marketing approach where we launched campaigns to attract people to come to our mountain. And we realized that there were breaks, obstacles to drive to the mountain because of distance, because of time. We had to come closer to the people, and also the issue of having school skiing excursions. So we tried to find new solutions a few years ago to attract skiers. Rather than attracting them to the mountain, we try to bring mountain closer to the skiers. So we undertook several initiatives. One, you see what we call the My Snow Experience. So we are in urban centers, like in the region of Montreal, which is a big city in Quebec with 4 million inhabitants. It means you still have to drive a long distance to go to the mountains. So as people who live in town don't all have cars or vehicles, we wanted to give them a taste of skiing to young people from 5 to 8, to children from 5 to 8. So we offer a complete experience. We installed carpets, as you can see, like ski lifts, and we brought snow, and we invite the young people to come for a free of charge initiation to skiing or snowboarding. As you can see, you have a small house, that's a welcome registration. We also provide equipment for free. We also provide them with the skiing experience. And in the end, we offer a celebration, like an accomplishment, where the child has a ski pass to go to the mountain. Because for us, what's important is to have what I call a conversion rate. At the beginning, when you arrive in such skiing centers, you have to register the child. So meaning you have his own data, so that we can make him the offer you can see on the screen. It's like a ski pass for first-time ski pass, includes one lesson of 60 minutes, the rental equipment also is included, and the access to the learning area. This ski pass is offered at a very low cost. It used to be $25, and this year it's $29.95, which is fairly affordable. And so we can then measure the journey of this child in terms of conversion. As you see, we've got 20% feedback in our ski resort. The other aspect, we know we need 3 visits to create a sort of customer loyalty. So once a child or the skier came, he has the possibility of coming back to the ski resort for a second visit, and this time there's no lesson included, but we also offer the access to the learning equipment and the equipment rental. The costs are paid by the association. Why do we do this type of job? Quite simply because the ski resorts are too busy with their customers. They are not really able, so to speak, well, maybe they don't have much time or not many resources to talk to the people who do not ski. So our challenge for renewing the customers, we don't want to attract the skiers in the mountain. We attract the skiers with beautiful pictures, stories on Instagram. But for those who've never been skiing, how can you attract them? That's why we launched such an initiative. And that's the reason why we go to schools. Since there's no more school outdoor visits, or at least less than before, we organize partnerships with Burton, where we go to school in fall, and we go back there in winter to introduce the equipment we develop with Burton to the young people. So during the gym period, I don't know if you say gym in France or if you call that physical education, as we say in French, it's éducation physics. So once snow is here, we go back to the schools, and we organize a program with equipment to introduce the young people to skiing on the snow, where there is in the yards, school yards. And we do the same thing for alpine skiing, so that we can have 50,000 new customers, which is a great result. So with this initiative in Quebec, we really stand out. And when you saw the ski pass we offer for the child, this ski pass is also available for the adult. Means he can go there with one of his parents. And of course, a 7-year-old child is not going to go on his own to the mountain. Hence, the point of also attracting the parents with the same ski pass. And that gives great results. So thank you. We have a totally different approach. It's like organizing a skiing simulation in town, so that children are more familiar with it, and then they go to the... It's like a taste, like tasting, like wine tasting, but for skiing tasting.
Who founded Pioneer Work? He's based in Tokyo, an outdoor consultancy firm. Yoichi helps mountain and outdoor destinations and businesses to develop their offering and marketing. He's even renamed the idea of outdoor sports into earth sports by introducing a dose of Japanese culture and lifestyle. 3 major projects, one of them we will talk about today. He introduced and implemented the Freeride World Tour in Asia. He just created last winter the first multi-resort season pass in Japan, something between a magic pass and almost an epic pass. And he helps also destinations to develop sustainable mountain biking experiences and projects. So Yoichi, maybe you want to talk about your Earth. Sorry, I had a picture here. The Earth Hopper. That's the multi-season or the multi-resort season pass in Japan. What is that all about?
Yeah, so Japanese. So let's speak about the basics of the Japanese ski industry's numbers. 30 years ago, like 90s Nagano Olympic Games around, there were 18 million skiers at least once going to ski resorts per year. But now it's declining into 5 million. So you can imagine how shrinking faster compared to the Japanese mountain industry and other countries. And I see through the communication with Freeride World Tour, I see European countries like Switzerland having Magic Pass. North American countries have multi-resort ski pass like Icon Pass and Epic Pass. And their result was increasing the number of skier visits into the ski resorts. So I was thinking that why not we having a multi-resort ski pass in Asia, having a Japanese ski resort at the core and aiming to sell them into Chinese and international customers. But actually it's very difficult to asking collaboration between Japanese ski resorts which have never been collaborated before. But with COVID, Japanese borders are still closed and their attitude toward collaboration becomes more open. So we launched this last October, and we sold 4,000 passes for the first year. And as the name suggests, we are trying not just selling ski pass, but also expanding it into mountain biking and camping, into more earth sports, hopping pass in the future, and of course selling it internationally as well.
So you're using the winter multi-resort ski pass to go camping in the summer as well?
Yeah, as you see, the European resorts as well, they are trying to provide summer activities recently. So I would like to help the ski resorts to invite new customers in summer with this pass.
And there is a trend in Japan towards more camping, more mountain biking, or is that just a good idea?
Definitely. So interesting example is Decathlon came to Japan 2 years ago. Okay. And there is one Japanese company selling same price range outdoor equipment, and their success was really impressive.
And they are cheaper than what you find usually in Japan?
Sorry?
They are cheaper? The products are cheaper?
Yeah, those products are cheaper, but there are some great camping equipment provider from Japan as well. And in general, yeah, camping industry is growing very fast in Japan.
Okay, interesting. So we're making that link between winter and summer, which is very interesting. Let's move forward. Isabel Frosch, qui vient de Savoie.
Oui. Who come from Savoie, is also a professor in the University Savoie-Mont Blanc, specialized in the consumers' behavior, mainly for tourist experience mountain area. Our most recent works are related to the first visitors in the mountain, people who come for the first time, but also sustainable behaviors on vacation and over-tourism as well. But in the worst case, we won't have over-tourism in mountain. But it's also an issue, of course. So Isabel, what are today? So she's a researcher, in fact. She's no longer wearing a white overhaul. She comes out of a lab and she's going to talk about what she does for TRI. What is the link with today's subject? What are the main themes, subjects on which you do research? So I have no wide overhaul, and we work a lot on the field. So our research is mainly fed by customers' experience, inquiry, both quantitative and qualitative, and all our research is always in the field. An issue for us over the last few years, due to COVID, of course, was for the first consumer, people who come to the mountain for the first time, who have very little knowledge, very few experiences. They not at all familiar with the mountains, and that's something which we find interesting, and we work on that. We refer to how they build their nest. It means how can you become familiar with different codes to convey the different codes of a territory to a customer who does not have them. Because, when you convey the codes, you have a better experience and you have a bigger loyalty to the mountainous area. And there's also another experience, of course. The better they understand, the more they are going to respect the environment where they are. So we have several hypotheses. One is, and we are going to collect data on what we call the bivouac initiative. It means initiating people to sleeping outdoor, camping outdoor, how to provide knowledge to those people, also to participative science. How can you help tourists become more familiar with the territory with a prospect of a regenerative tourism? That's all subjects which are of great interest to us. There's another subject which is also very interesting with another hypothesis. All research which has been carried out over the last decades proves that whatever you do with a tourist, even if they are very virtuous, if they have sustainable behaviors, once they go back home, they forget in their journey back home. They forget about all these virtuous experiences. How come there is such a gap between their behavior in their daily life and their behavior as a tourist? It means people in their daily life can have sustainable attitudes and are going to take the plane as very easily. So we have another thesis which studies the Compostile hiking. When you spend your life hiking on such paths with everything in your rucksack, what is your experience with the environment after your experience? And we really see rather radical changes in those people who've been hiking on the path of Saint-Jacques of Compostelle. So far, we don't understand how we can help the consumer change their way of consuming. So all your works, you do that in collaboration with different stakeholders on the field, and they also use your conclusions in order to feed their way of thinking and of organizing their own experience. Oh, yeah. One of the two theses on the Compostelle Pass is funded by a private consulting company located in Chambéry. And it's always very important for us to, we organize what we call amphipodes. It means lectures for everybody, open to everybody, and I'm trying to have videos in order to convey the messages to as many people as possible. In order, for example, to present the results of our study in 15 minutes, which is a very efficient way of conveying. Because researchers' knowledge is public and has to remain in the public and has to be disseminated, even if you have to try and simplify them before disseminating them. So, and this dissemination work is for us very important. Otherwise, there is no point in research for me. So let's come back to winter now with a rather extraordinary subject, which is the one of Tomorrowland, where you are carrying out a very serious study. What is the motivation of studying celebration in a ski resort? So we have worked on Tomorrowland. We went for a week in order to interview and observe the consumer of Tomorrowland. And this idea was based on the fact that we already worked on the audience of fall leaders in some ski resorts, how they could mix skiing and celebrating during a ski stay, just to see whether there is a new customer segment. So working on this idea of Tomorrowland meant going further in the idea, have a more thorough approach. So the original idea was to study how customers who are over 14 can feel legitimate in a festival, which is normally targeted to younger people. So we worked on that, and we came to interviewing the young people, because if old people, I can also consider myself as an old person, if old people feel at ease, it's maybe because the young people simply accept them and their festivals. So we worked a lot on this relation between them, between the two generations, as well as with authorities of Tomorrowland. Also worked with the local stakeholders to better understand this momentum. It's this Tomorrowland festival is really something very special. But I also think that in the exchange we had beforehand, you also have this notion of bringing together different generations, namely what we call the new seniors, the X generation, which is also here in the Folie Douce or in other places. It's this X generation is coming to the end of its skiing careers, because there were the baby boomers, and they are quite numerous, so it's maybe very interesting to keep them as long as we can, even if it is just by offering them the possibility of celebrating. I wanted to add also another element. Even though we don't have statistics of Tomorrowland, but all the interviews we conducted there, all the seniors, or the elderly people, I would call them, they belong to the upper middle class, upper class. It means like what we call creative class, and these people have a very high purchasing power, and they are almost a class, a social class in itself, and they are going to travel around the planet to come to Alpe d'Huez to be there in Tomorrowland. It's almost easier to invite senior people from the other side of the planet than inviting children to skiing. So it's right in the middle of a game between generations. Ursula.
Family marketing. She helps companies in all sorts of industries create exciting experiences for those target groups specifically. And she more specifically helps mountain destinations, but also ski areas, ski schools, family hotels, more often in Austria than elsewhere, to create the family experiences. And she's also very passionate about innovation in this field. Ursula, we just talked about Generation X. We'll talk about teenagers and young adults just after this. But from a general point of view, whether winter or summer, how do mountain areas or destinations adapt the experience to all kinds of children depending on their age groups, their gender, and so on? How should they think those things?
There are really 3 points which are very, very important if we want to talk to kids and families. And nowadays it's all family marketing, not so much kids marketing anymore. But the kid is always the core of the family. Kids influence the decisions to go on a holiday up to 60%. So if the kid doesn't want to go on a ski holiday, it's just not going to happen. So what are we going to do? There are 3 points. The first point is that we have to understand our audience. It's not just kids. And I hear that a lot, right? Oh, it's just kids. Kids are at least 6 different target groups. We have to differentiate by age. A 5-year-old wants something completely different from an 8-year-old, from a 10-year-old. Kids always want to be a little older than they are. Mascots generally stop at around 8. It has to do with the development of the brain of the children. They're just interested in different stuff. So the first differentiation is the age group. The second differentiation is the sex. Boys want something completely different from girls. And especially in the ski area, we tend towards boys a lot, right? And we sometimes forget the girls. So that's really, really important. It's also important to know that after Corona, families want something completely different from their holidays. They want more family togetherness, strangely enough. They've been together for a long time, but there's a lot of studies nowadays. They want, and they want someone to tell them what to do, right? So that's very important. We have to know what the kids want. We have to know our target group. Secondly, we need to understand that we sell experiences and we sell entertainment. I know that you guys talk a lot about skier days. Maybe you should be talking more about entertainment days, about edutainment days. Because for kids up to 12, it's perfectly okay to learn something, and parents want that too. So it's all about entertainment, and it's all about edutainment and experience. The third point, and maybe that's the most important point, is that we have to look at those experiences. Not just what we do, but what others do, what kids are interested in nowadays. Because kids nowadays are very different from kids 20 years ago or 40 years ago when I was young. We have to look at what interests them and get the fabric of those experiences and weave them into the fabric of our experiences. What does this mean? This means that we look at, I don't know, even for example, how video games work. What keeps kids at video games? What is the fabric of these experiences? And then we can take these ideas and bring them to what we do. How does storytelling work? Very important. Storytelling for younger kids. How does gamification work? How can we gamify our content? Nowadays, everything is gamified. Everything has a story. We need to adapt that too. Might not be of big significance to you, but Lego, Epic Games, who run Fortnite, and Sony have just teamed up last week to create kids' experiences in the metaverse that's coming. Now that's big news. Huge news also for us, because we need to understand what kind of experiences they will create in order to look at what's interesting and bring it to our areas. I'm not saying do virtual stuff. I'm saying look at what's cool there and then bring it. I brought 3 examples. If you look at the one picture, the Steinbergkönig, it's an experience we created in Pillerseetal. It's a big area in Tirol. It's virtually an escape game. I don't know if you've ever played an escape game, right? Nowadays they do that in cities, in a room. We did it on the mountain. There are 6 to 7 of those stations all across the valley, and the riddles are not easy. The whole family has to work together. This is not kids play anymore, this is family play. And the whole idea of what keeps people at escape games has been implemented. They started last year, which was a tough summer, you know that, but they've already built new stations, and it's something that people keep coming back for it because it's so interesting. And next one, the little rabbit, is storytelling. In Serfaus, we created a storytelling slope of where kids, through a story of the rabbit and of an owl and of other animals, learn distinct movements they need in skiing. So the rabbit is a quick rabbit. He says to the kids, "Oh, you have to be quick and you have to run fast." And the way the rabbit runs is in how do you say, in like this, right?
Turning.
So in turns, right? So the kid has to turn with the skis. So by even not knowing it, the kid learns through a story. The third one is called Superstar. It's a ski school program also in Serfaus. They found out that the older kids, they don't want the mascot anymore. They don't want the sticker of the mascot on the helmet. They peel it off in the evening because that is not interesting anymore, right? So for older kids, they created an edutainment program. Kids learn something, not just skiing. They also learn something from the teacher, from the skiing teacher, about snow, about emergencies, about rules on the slope, whatever. In the evening, there's a little quiz. 8 to 12-year-olds love quizzes, perfectly fine, right? And then, they're part of this Superstar, Cool Star program, and they have the sticker of Superstar on their helmet. They get little points. They have a cool little card where the points are created. So it's something for older kids because they're just not interested anymore in the mascots. And here we looked at games, at even video games or, toys that older kids use, what is interesting. So you see, we look at other areas and bring those experiences of the other areas into our field, into skiing, into mountain experiences, and this is what makes it interesting.
So we're not afraid of mixing different universes, different worlds, and we're not just in the mountains. We also stay connected to what the children like when they're in their couch being a potato.
Exactly.
Basically.
Exactly,
Okay.
yes. We look at what they like and then we implement it.
Okay.
And yes, fantasy and different worlds, storytelling,
Okay.
very important.
Okay. Okay, thank you. Thank you. On va monter un cran en termes d'âge. On va parler des...
We're going to move up in age. We're going to talk about young people, young adults, with Fabrice Pangouk, who's president of Auvergne-Rhône-Alpes Tourism. He's also an elected official. He's the mayor of Moutier, so he's very familiar with mountain issues, and he has a double point of view. So we're talking about mountain promotion and marketing, but there's also public action that can help to join the dots. So with Auvergne-Rhône-Alpes Tourism, Fabrice, you especially target certain groups. You can target young people in the broad sense of the term. What are the main ideas behind that? We target everybody, in fact, but we do have a focus on young people because we're convinced that the generation renewal requires working with young people. And we've also seen and measured and qualified the fact that there is an erosion of young people. So how do we go about things? Well, there are different ways that we go about things. I'm very much attached to what I refer to as keywords, using the right language when you're addressing the target that you want to pick up. So we use a lot of digital tools for this. This is what you wanted us to talk about. So digital tools, we use the codes of the target public, and we use key opinion leaders, bloggers. So, for example, we organized a campaign for the winter season where bloggers, key opinion leaders are in mountain resorts, are practicing mountain sports. So 3 bloggers, 10 videos, 30,000 views. So, you can see the influence, the striking force of this digital influence. And then there's the question of price, where we have to bring together all of the right conditions to reach a very broad public so that they can come up to these tourist destinations. So that work looks at different targets and uses different methods. Notably, we work with the Mountain Generation Program. So this is something that we do with the Auvergne-Rhône-Alpes Tourism Agency. The idea there is to take with us other stakeholders from the mountain areas. And we have a kind of a grading system that helps us to target all different types of publics in order to get them to the tourist destination, and especially mountain destinations. And let me now broaden the age target. So we're just coming out of the crisis, so 21 months that were very difficult for different reasons, mainly health reasons. And I'm convinced that it was a kind of a catalyst for a certain number of deep-reaching phenomena that were already there before the crisis, but they've been speeded up because of the crisis. So we've had to work on different solutions. There's been a sociological transition in our areas. And before we found ourselves in that situation, the agency had a baseline, benevolent tourism it was called. And I think this really summarizes what we want to do. The way we, leave our print on an area. Being a tourist means leaving your print somewhere. It's not a neutral action. It doesn't have no consequences. And if we say it doesn't, then we're liars. So how can the print be as small as possible? How can we be a benevolent tourist, especially in the places where we visit? And so we've got different ideas. So well-being, there's the notion of benevolence, which is very important. So we focus on young people. There's the notion of benevolence, whether we actually use the word or not. That's what underlines our actions. So we have to be able to address different publics. There are major sports enthusiasts. There are extreme sports enthusiasts. We need to target them. And then there are others who come up to our mountain areas because they're looking for contemplation. They're looking to admire the landscapes and to be able to meditate, to think about things. We need to target that public as well. So it's important to understand the whole panel of different publics and then send out the right message. And we have a certain number of tools, obviously, to do this. And I'm speaking as a regional councillor. Tools that we use for young people, so holiday colonies, centres, for example, for young people. It's important to make sure that they take something away with them from the mountain area. So it's something that they will keep and that they will remember straight away or maybe later on. So in 80% of cases, 70% of cases, once a young person has gone up to the mountains, they become a mountain consumer later on in life.
To see two approaches of the summer, very different. Yoichi, you have several projects with which you develop what you call sustainable mountain biking, even in places that are not really ski resorts as such, but they are in the mountains and they have a very special history to them as well.
Yeah, several of our clients are not ski resorts, but they just have mountains and asking us to help redevelop the mountains. And we discovered ancient trails all across Japanese mountains with small shrines in it, and monks and lumberjacks used in ancient times. So some of the mountain bikers in Japan redevelop it into mountain biking trails, which this picture shows. And as well, in order to generate the maximum value from the forest and the mountains, we propose them to generate a carbon credit from the forest. So we run two projects in Hokkaido, north of Japan area and the mid-Japan area, having a similar project, taking advantage of the old ancient trails into mountain biking and generating carbon credit from the forest.
So monks, lumberjacks, but there's also a story about carbon credits in there.
Carbon credit is a very new concept.
Yeah.
So if the forest is there, they absorb CO2. So there is a system in the past 5 or 10 years, and now the carbon credit markets from the forest carbon credit market is growing. So I believe similar approach can be applicable to some other places as well.
Okay, so mountain biking while generating carbon credit for the same place where you're biking.
It can be long, so making it short. Carbon credit is more like managing the forest. Yeah. So rather than keeping the forest as it is, there is a people maintaining the forest, keeping the ability of the forest absorbing the CO2. That makes the CO2, which is still absorbed from the forest, into a carbon credit, so generating a new value of it.
Okay, interesting. Yves Junot, les stations de ski.
Ski resorts in Quebec in the summer. It's yes, no, yes, How are you addressing that question? Yes, it's yes. It's yes, given the context of climate change. So increasingly, we're developing different activities. We've got the great example of Mont Tremblant. So we've got a business model where resorts are private. They're not supported by municipal councils. They have to develop activities in order to become profitable, to make sure that their investments have a return. When we're talking about ski chalets or ski lifts, these things are expensive, and with the pandemic, people have wanted to come up to the mountains even more. They want to benefit from the fresh air. So there's been a great growth, and there are ski resorts that propose mountain biking, like the colleague in Japan. So there's a whole diversity of activities. There are lots of different events. So with different festivals, blues festivals, music festivals. There are water parks, there are lakes. There's a whole multitude of different offers, attracting more people in the summer than in the winter period. So this is a model that is expanding. that can be found in different resorts, water parks, sledging possibilities. It's really a great way to increase the attractiveness of mountain areas. And hopefully these customers, the summer customers, will come back in the winter for winter skiing. So mountain biking, so yeah, we call it VTT in French. It's been transformed, yes. We had big centres that attracted the World Cup, Mont-Saint-Anne, Romans, attracting hardcore mountain bikers. But the pandemic changed things, so the sport has become more democratic, and now the levels of difficulty are much lower. There are paths for beginners, so the sport can be done by families, for example, so not just by experienced cyclists. So that means that there's a bigger volume, there are more people. Yes, absolutely. Like in a place like Bromont, you've got 60,000 people going up on the chairlifts to go downhill mountain biking. So it's certainly developing very quickly. So the easier it is, the more people you attract. The more difficult it is, the fewer people you have. Yes, with the development of the paths, we've also worked on e-bike rental and bike rentals generally. And so that's why lots of people are beginning to mountain bike, like myself. Isabel Frosch, so you talked about nesting. It's kind of a strategy for individuals so that they buy into a place whose codes they don't know. But does that mean that we can help with the nesting process? Yes, absolutely. We can create a verb if it doesn't exist for this, so nesting. So yes, it's important to make proposals. It's up to resorts, to areas to work on processes so that customers can really appropriate their tourist experience. So we can see that there are different initiatives. Canada was very much ahead of its times when it came to nesting processes. But yes, we're just at the beginning in France. Whatever the case, we're going to have to question these aspects because with COVID, mountain areas have been kind of overloaded with visitors. So we need to think about that as well. So there's the question of safety as well. But as I was saying, it's very important when it comes to people feeling attached to a place. If you don't provide the right codes, a consumer will not see something. It won't necessarily be unhappy. They will have the experience, but it will be rather static. But they won't feel any emotions and they won't develop any attachment to the place. Otherwise, they will miss things. Several years ago, we carried out a study. We interviewed a lot of customers in the summer. Out of 100, only 3 had seen groundhogs. For us, it's very exotic to see a groundhog. And, if they didn't know about them, they, missed out on some marvelous things because they didn't know where to go, how to go about it, how to look. So you miss out on things. You miss out on the DNA of the mountain area, of what it offers and what it can offer in the summer as well. So if I take the notion a bit further, so the bivouacking experience at the Bastille, that's nesting as well. Yes, that's right. So basically the idea is to bring the mountains closer to Grenoble people so that you no longer have that notion of, my goodness, look at those mountains in the distance. So the idea organized by the town hall is to break down social barriers because there's mountaineering, but there's bivouacking. These are practices that have a social class connotation. You don't do it because there's a whole legacy behind that. So bivouacking, the idea is to allow people to a low-income population to find out what it's like to bivouac, and then they can see what it's like as a leisure activity, even if they aren't able to access that kind of activity normally for financial reasons or other reasons.
Of a new environment, of a different environment, which is that of the mountains, what do you say to people who think that these very gamified experiences are actually not really mountains, that has nothing to do with the mountains?
But it does.
But it does.
And we see, I mean, as you know, in Austria, we do a lot of gamification in the mountains, and it's hugely successful. I highly encourage you to go on the website of Der Steinbergkönig in Pillerseetal. If you bring it up again, people can see.
Yep.
It is a gamified content, but it is in the mountains. So basically what we do is we bring people up, and it's beautiful what you said. We nest them on the mountains with stories, with experiences they know from somewhere else. You guys want new customers. Look at what they are interested in and then bring what they are interested in to the mountains, and they will come. Because it's something that triggers, it's a trigger that kind of, they know, right? And here we let ourselves inspire by escape games. We let ourselves inspire by Game of Thrones. Go on the website, right? If you're a Game of Thrones fan, you will see there's lots of elements in there, which nowadays is just pop culture, right? So there's a moment of understanding, this could be for me. And maybe I have never been to the mountains. Maybe I've never skied, right? These things are coming in winter too, right? And also when you talked about mountain biking, now we do mountain bike trails with stories. We do riddle mountain bike trails. We do riddle biking trails, right? So we really put an experience, not just the sport itself. The sport itself is cool, but if you overlay that with an experience, with emotion, you've said it, I love that, right? If you overlay it with emotion, you just bring more customers to the mountains, and you bring them again and again because they're into this emotion and they're into this experience.
Okay, thank you. Une dernière question à Fabrice Pankouk. Comment, on a parlé des centres de vacances, etc., mais comment l'action publique peut aussi aider à tout ça? On a parlé beaucoup de marketing, de promotion, de clients, etc. Mais par exemple, quand on fait des campagnes digitales, on aspire des jeunes dans le système digital, et puis s'il veut s'intéresser à réserver quelque chose quelque part, mais qu'un hébergeur ou des prestataires ne sont pas très digitalisés, est-ce que l'action publique peut aussi aider là-dedans?
L'action publique le fait, je dirais, de différentes manières. Là, on est allé sur quelques focales parce que le temps nous est compté. En réalité, on est dans une démarche qui est plus globale.
In reality, we're in a global approach, and we were talking about financing just a bit earlier on. It's one of the elements that's really essential. Then you have communication. The communication that you implement, generally speaking. So you've got the digital side of things. That's very important because you know what kind of target you're focusing on. But it's not exclusive. The idea is to address communities when you're using digital tools. We have to continue to do this because this is what I said with the figures earlier on. We've got some very good results, but we have to do this more globally speaking. Whatever the case, we've got additional efforts to be made, and that's with national education. So it's not the region's responsibility. We're in charge of tourism, okay, but we're working with the Ministry of Tourism, but we need to work with the Ministry of Education, and we're doing that. We're doing some deep-reaching work. We've been seeing an erosion of the course of different decades with snow schools, snow classes. We need to get rid of the seasons. We need to provide the keys for people to discover mountain areas. And once we've provided those keys, once we've spread the seeds, they will germinate over time. So, so you need to go beyond the seasons. And then if we go back several decades, it's important to keep in mind that the authorities can make it easier for people to discover mountains. In Auvergne-Rhône-Alpes Tourism, in our organization, we're providing initial support. When a class from the Rhône-Alpes area decides to go up to the mountains, we give them 3,000 euros. So we pay, in 90% of cases, we pay 100% of the transport costs. So we remove that economic barrier. However, today, we have regulations that are weighing down not only on teachers and the supervision system, which and it takes a lot of supervision. I think we need to facilitate things from that point of view. So it's like in centres, there are representatives here that in the centres, we can't just have constraints and constraints. Why have we suffered? Why did we suffer between December and February during the last season? Well, it's quite simply because of COVID. In spite of all of the efforts made, in spite of the great results that we had, that meant that we had no difficulties in the centre, in spite of all of that, there were other constraints. And so it was just easier for people not to go. And so if we want to reach our objectives, because everybody says we have to do this, today everybody says we have to reach our objectives. If we want to reach our objectives, this means that we have to make an effort. We have to do everything at the same time. We have to work with people who are in charge of regulation. We have to release the brake. We've got to make sure that people that can help with financing help. And then the people who provide support and investment in centres, for example, when we're talking about standards, not everything should be thrown out. Investments need to be made. We need to provide support for that. Local authorities who work with the centres, they need to be conscious of the economic factor. What is generated, the finance that is generated. And then with the communities and targets, it's important to provide a helping hand so that the best messages are broadcast, whether they're digital messages, printed message, or verbal messages via oral communication. So, you know, with the Olympic Games, with the World Championships, when athletes talk positively about their stay in the mountains, that's also very important to zoom in on that. It's important for young people. Young people need to, compare themselves to these athletes, to these sports people who speak publicly. And it's important to be able to create that universe and to, create an appetite so that young people, they keep that appetite right through to their adulthood. And one last point, and then I'll stop. So it's important to stop thinking about seasons. We know what makes the economics of our area. It's skiing, it's chairlifts, it's snow, but it's also because there is this overall movement that's taking us towards diversification. Just go to the other end of the trade fair and you will see this. So we need to understand that it's important to have global communication about everything that we have in the mountains, not just for summer and winter seasons. That's a great conclusion. I don't know, we've got 3 minutes left. Do we have enough time? No, I've been told that we don't have enough time for questions.
This topic, mais bien évidemment que ceux qui souhaitent et celles.
But of course, you can continue the conversation. You can continue the conversation later, individually, or we can keep in contact via internet and talk with each other remotely.
Ça fonctionne pas. Ouais. Bonjour à tous. Donc nous remercions le salon Mountain.
So welcome to Mountain Planet. It was a pleasure of welcoming the branch of Forest and Wood to present to you the point of having wood material in building and in renovation, namely for the buildings in ski resorts. So I'm going to introduce you Benjamin Bermet, who is a wood building from Fibois prescriber, who is going to present all the sides of wood material, and then Sarah Verissel from Lyon Fauve, who is going to present a project called Renovasim with the help of the Pole of Excellence in Wood, a project which was launched a few years ago on the renovation of coal beds in mountainous areas. And after this show, we'll invite you to a virtual visit right on our right, meaning on your left. So I'm now giving the floor to Benjamin Bermet for the size of wood in buildings. Good afternoon. Can you hear me? So, as was already introduced, I come from Fibois, Auvergne-Rhône-Alpes. So here you've got all the regional and territory branches in wood and construction. So you see on the left-hand side, you've got six industries, 6 areas of industries, branches of industries to be very close to the field industries, because you don't have the same problems in mountain or in plains. And even more with the Rhône and Lyon metropole, with quite different actions in wood. So quickly, let me give you an idea of wood building. Why this wood construct building? And I'm going to show you feedbacks on buildings in mountainous areas, new buildings or renovation. So you have key figures and example showing that you can build with wood in mountainous areas. So you tend to think of chalet, but I'm going to try and show you that you can build other things than just chalet with wood. And it's not only wood outside, but it's mainly the frame, which is made out of wood. So the aim was also to have a short introduction of what the forest and wood branch represents. So when you talk about this branch, it's really forest management. So it's mainly for forest management from the owner to the building, the layout, renovation, wood energy, also processing, wood energy or pulp. So panels, so it's a rather big branch we represent. So it's 20,000 companies, 63,000 jobs, which really range from all different areas, from forest management, forest operation, until the building, via the barrel construction, barrel making, mainly in Auvergne. So building is not limited just on this region. We have got 400 companies building with wood, which range from the small company of 2 to 3 employees to companies with more than 100 employees. So it means they are big companies carrying out big projects, as I show you in the following slides. Something else which is also important is that 3/4 of the harvested wood in our forests are processed locally. So it's not, this wood is not exported, it stays here. So in our region, we really have all these different steps of the branch which are represented. So we can meet at a local level the demand for the processing of these products. So often talking about wood building, but if you develop wood building, does it not mean the extinction of forest? So this slide just is here to show you that the French forest, so that's a picture representing 1815 and 2012. But French forest keeps on growing. Approximately 1850s, there was an over-exploitation of the forest. And thanks to different rule regulations, for widening our forest, for giving it a bigger role, a bigger surface area on the French territory. So it accounts for approximately 30% of the territory in France. And between 1985, if you look at here, with a pointer, well, I lost it. Between 1985 and 2020, you see the surface area increased in a very dramatic way. So you can see it in Auvergne-Rhône-Alpes region. I'm going to show you. We harvest only one part of this forests which are growing. As you can see it on next slide. So you see the forest is going to grow by 16 million cubic meters per year. The tree is going to grow, and we harvest only 1/3 of this forest. So it's no way over exploitation. It's even, I would say, an under exploitation operation of the forest, meaning we still have got room for growing in the region and even in France. I think we can widely use wood in construction and building. So as it's an under exploitation of the forest, it means every year the forest grows by 3% in volume. So it's the forest is growing, at least in the region of Auvergne-Rhône-Alpes. So the idea of today's conference was to talk about the environment advantage. What should you build with wood, and what does it represent? Can we only build chalets, or can you build other things? And one of the major advantages of building, namely it's the environment and its carbon storing. This material is the only building material which is renewable, and this material is going to store carbon. So most of the time you use wood for building, and you also store carbon. It's not only environmental advantage in wood construction. In base wood, you also have carbon sequestration, storing. So the tree is going to absorb oxygen. It's going to absorb oxygen, and it's going to keep 50% of the wood material is made out of carbon. So thanks to photosynthesis, it's going to expel oxygen and keep carbon out of carbon dioxide. So you've got carbon dioxide, which is being absorbed by the tree. The tree releases oxygen and keeps carbon. So that's what you call sequestration during the growing of the tree. If you keep it, the tree is going to become mature and have a sort of balance. It still keeps on absorbing carbon, but since it is aging, it will need less carbon dioxide to grow, so there will be less sequestration. So it's going to store carbon. So it's 50% of the material. 50% of the tree material is carbon. If you don't harvest it, if you leave it as it is, there can be a risk of forest fire, of trees dying, mortality. So the best solution is what you see on the side is what we call storing. It means we are going to cut the tree and we are going to store this material in our construction. As 50% of the material is made out of carbon, it will keep on keeping carbon. Even if it's dead, it will no longer absorb carbon, but it will keep on keeping it. So when you take a piece of paper, you store paper. You store carbon. 50% of the paper is made out of carbon. Every wood material is made out of 50% carbon during the entire life of the building. So in the end, there will be substitution, meaning that all the byproducts like granulates, the forest plaques, which are products with which you cannot do buildings, which are byproducts. These byproducts we substitute for other energies as well to produce a renewable energy. So that we call wood energy. Substituting other energies like fuel and gas, which are non-renewable energy. I mean renewable, but a very long-term renewable. So you call them non-renewable. So let's have a look at what I explained. The carbon cycle. So if you take a natural forest, like Amazonian forest, which is like a real green lung. So during the first 100 years, forest absorbs CO2. Then, when it comes to maturity, some trees are going to die, so they start rejecting CO2, and some others will grow, so there will be sort of balance between rejecting and absorbing. So the point here is to having sustainable forests, as what we have in Europe. So what does that mean? It means they are going to absorb carbon dioxide, store it within the tree, you harvest it. These harvested wood will be used for building and layout, and then we are going to plant a new forest to always have a carbon sequestration. So the point is having a productive forest, but which is also used as a green lung forest and for the future. So, well, it's a great idea to have a biosourced material, which is very relevant because it's a real answer, direct answer to climate, global warming, and to carbon sequestration. That's really the issue of today and of the future. So the tree meets all the requirements. It means, and you don't need to have very heavy tools. I saw ventilators in Switzerland, fans. There's like a whole wall of fans which is going to absorb the carbon dioxide, and with the carbon they are going to bury it under the earth and reject oxygen. Well, why not? But that requires a lot of material to create these fan walls. And with the forest it's quite natural and it does exactly the same job. So why is it I would say safe value? Because this material is a vegetal product, so in temperate rainforests and heterogeneous material. And thanks to all these chains of production like sewing, building, we have components, finished products, which will meet the different, which will be compliant with all the standards and will meet all the requirements of the building area. So it's an heterogeneous material. And we get components which can be qualified and quantified and which will be homogeneous. So wood is really a standardized material. And that's very important for the builders. It's really what we would call a classical material. Nothing, mainly for the insurance companies. It's something recognized, something standardized, and the area, our branch really works just to prove that what we've been doing for 150 years, or even on which we've been working for 200 years. We've got standards today which guarantees through branding, labeling, because you need a lot of standards right now to have technical documents, single technical documents. And this branch has all these elements. So we namely have the catalog of wood construction, which is an internet site which is completely free of access, where you've got all the technical details for new building, for renovation. It's really a tool of our branch, which is very useful. So, well, great to say it's a standardized material. We've got it in the forest, so there's no problem of having it, getting it. But so why don't we build more with wood? How come there's not more buildings with wood? Because everybody says it's beautiful, but it's only meant for chalet. So I could have said what wood construction has a lot of assets. I wanted to show you advantages of assets, namely using of clean building sites, easy to install, a very light material with different earthquake requirements. Talk about a lot about pre-building out of the building site. And one of the great advantages is comfort for the employees, meaning they work in workshops, protected. So they are going to do things much easier and with a bigger quality, different working in a workshop with very good working condition with panels, rather than working on a scaffold under the rain or with wind, where it's more difficult to work and your work will be less performing. But I want to show it to you with projects. So mountain ranges from low to high altitudes. I wanted to show you projects. There's 4 of them. In Bourdoisan, it's not in a ski resort. It's not a high one, but it's still mountain. And here you see a building, which is the headquarters of the group of municipalities of Oisin. So here in this building, there's no wood outside. You don't see wood at all. It's cement cladding, so something very traditional. The only wood you see outside is a piece of what you see underneath. And here the wood is protected, so it's not going to become grey. But the architect wanted to show some wood outside, but protected one. Otherwise, the entire building is made out of wood, in fact. Namely, out of wood, bois des Alpes, wood from the Alps, which is a sort of certification. So it's not because you build with wood that you see wood from the outside. Mainly for the public markets, for public buildings, there is a way of showing that they build with wood. And the solution here by the architects is really to show the wood inside the building. Another project is a hotel and a spa, Saint-Alban in La Clusaz ski resort. This building was completely pre-built in workshops. Even inside cladding was already done in workshops. Why do I show you this project? Because it's a classical hotel with a wood cladding. The first 2 levels, where the first levels are made out of concrete because they are because they are inside the slope, so there were some constraints. But the 4 following levels are all made out of wood. Even the lift and the staircases are made out of wood. This project, at the beginning, was to be made entirely out of concrete, but the wood, it was slightly more expensive to build it with wood, but it could be built more quickly, so it meant 1 more season. It was built before winter. So the building was slightly more expensive, but it was delivered before. It could be opened in December 2018 instead of opening it in 2019. So it might be also an advantage for them. So my building might be more expensive, but I can open it 1 year before it. And that can be an argument for it. That's the reason why the building, which was planned to be made only out of concrete, was built in fact or entirely out of wood. So how did they do it? There's almost no inside finishing. Everything is made out of wood. The entire company, wood building company, made it. So what you see here was made directly out of wood. Very little other material. So as I said, building is more expensive, but you don't have to switch from one type of building to another type. So it can be quicker done. Another building, it's a renovation. That's a finished building. And that's what you had during the building construction. So that's an extension on 4 levels. So that was a renovation, an existing building. So you can also do renovation with wood, what I would call heavy renovation. There's 2 advantages in this project. Almost no wood outside, so the aging of the building will be very homogeneous. And as wood is light, with light wood, you don't need to, if you wish to add stores, you don't need to have two solid foundations if you want to add different stores. It's easier to add stores made out of wood because it's a light material. Otherwise, sometimes you need to rework on the foundations of the building. So you have more surface area, so it means more rooms or more possibility to sell surface areas. So this building was made entirely out of wood structure with a counter-glued panel, as you can see. A last building, last example. It's the highest hotel in Europe made out of wood structure in a ski resort. So it's entirely made out of wood. Everything is made out of wood. Everything you see here is made out of wood. And here, why do I show you this project, which was delivered in 2020 for several reasons? Because it's a 3D modular. It means the entire building was designed in a workshop. So it means, I would say it's even higher quality than the previous one, because they came with all the different equipment, with all the finishing, and even with the furniture. Everything was made in the workshop. So that's the first asset of this building. And the second one, it was delivered in 2020. It was during COVID period, meaning there was a shift in a delay in almost all the building site. And as everything was made in a workshop, and the company closed only 2 weeks during the very first lockdown in order to get reorganized, and afterwards they could catch on their delay, and they delivered on time. So the building was delivered on time. There was no delay, thanks to the building out of the site. So that's pictures of the finished building. So they had done a sort of showroom. So you see here, it's in the Loire. It was in the Loire area, because everything was built in the Loire. And then they came into the showroom, the builders, the architects, and they said, okay, that's what we like. They chose what they wanted. And once everything was validated, these pictures, I took them during a visit on the building site. That's in the workshops of the building company in Bay-Loire. And you see that the kitchen is already here, plumbery, the bathtub, also. They were still putting on the mirror, but everything is finished. So it just came and delivered, and they only needed to connect, like everything was finished.
Alors, très rapidement,
So very quick.
comment réaliser un projet en construction bois? La meilleure des solutions, c'est vraiment de prévoir le matériau bois dès l'amont du projet, dès la programmation, qu'on soit vraiment sûr d'avoir une conception qui soit faite avec le matériau. Et donc, voilà, un peu schématiquement, on a la maîtrise d'ouvrage, on a l'architecte, on a l'entreprise, et il faut aussi, surtout si on veut travailler avec le bois de notre région ou le bois français, se renseigner sur qu'est-ce que la filière peut nous proposer, quels sont les matériaux qui sont disponibles autour de notre projet pour qu'on soit sûr d'être sur un projet en bois et en bois local, si c'est le souhait. Donc, notamment sur un marché public, ce qui va être important, c'est le sourcing, c'est vraiment de se renseigner, donc de prendre contact avec nous, interprofessions. Nous, on est là en fait pour vous aiguiller et mettre en relation entre cette offre et votre demande et l'offre qui est disponible sur votre territoire. Et donc le sourcing est un bon moyen de répondre à ça. On a des certifications et des marques comme Bois de France. Sur le territoire plutôt Auvergne-Rhône-Alpes, on va avoir Bois des Alpes et Bois des Territoires du Massif central, qui sont des certifications qui vont vous permettre en fait de garantir la provenance du bois et sa qualité. Et donc ces trois-là ont l'avantage de pouvoir être mis dans un marché public, donc en mettant bien sûr Bois des Alpes ou équivalent, Bois de France ou équivalent, mais c'est possible. Et après, sur le territoire alpin, on a vraiment, et sur le Jura, on a encore d'autres marques et des AOC qui vont, pareil, garantir une provenance, une traçabilité et surtout la provenance qui va être garantie. Et donc pour finir, un site internet qui est vraiment très important, qui est le panoramabois.fr. C'est un site internet où dessus, en fait, vous allez voir, ça c'est quelques projets qui sont sur Sur le panorama bois, vous avez les prix, vous avez les intervenants, vous avez des photos, vous avez une explication sur ces projets-là. Il y a à peu près 6000 références sur ce site internet. Donc c'est des choses qui sont très récentes. On voit, ça va du refuge du goûter qui est assez emblématique, qui est le refuge le plus haut, qui est tout en structure bois. On le voit ici, là, pendant sa construction. D'autres refuges, des maisons, des salles hors sac, des logements. Voilà, on a énormément des bureaux d'entreprise, des écoles. On a énormément de choses en fait qui sont sur le panorama bois par rapport au milieu de montagne. Et après donc notre site internet avec des guides qui vont vous mettre un peu, vous flécher les entreprises de notre territoire, mais aussi des conseils pourquoi construire en bois, comment construire en bois. Et si vous venez, puisque Montagne Planète, c'est quand même international et donc c'est aussi au niveau français. Donc si vous venez par exemple des Pyrénées, sachez que vous avez un fibois dans chaque région et donc qui peut, comme moi, vous aiguiller sur vos projets de construction. Et enfin, mon contact en tant que chargé de mission bois construction au sein de Fibois Auvergne-Rhône-Alpes. Voilà, ça a été un peu dense, c'était timing serré, un peu dense, mais j'espère que j'ai pu répondre un peu à vos interrogations. Je vous propose peut-être de passer donc à Sarah Viricel de Lieu Fauve qui va vous présenter Rénovacim, puis on passera, si vous avez des questions-réponses, on passera à la fin un temps consacré à ça. Pardon.
So, if you'd like to take over. Can everybody hear me? So my name is Sarah Viricel. I work for Techni Architect, which is in the Lieu Fauve building. So we've been working on this Rénovacim project. It was launched by the Wooden Excellence Cluster. It's a research and development project for sustainable renovation of mountain residences based on local approaches and approaches that are also sustainable. When we say local and sustainable, we need to know what we're talking about. When we hear sustainable, it's the environmental aspect of the approach that is important. In other words, making sure that consumption is is not extravagant and looking at the carbon footprint. When we say local, I think it's fairly clear what we're talking about. It's making sure that the stakeholders are local. And when we talk about sustainable, that's the economic aspect that we're talking about, the economic aspect underlying the operation, so the overall cost. So the project was based on an observation. In resorts, there is a phenomenon called empty beds. In other words, because the buildings are getting old today, they're not used as much. And we're often seeing that the beds are not being used as much. So not as many people are going to the buildings. So that means that not many people are going to the resorts. Fewer and fewer people are going to resorts, going up to the mountain areas. So the idea of the renovation for mountain residences is to adapt to the new challenges, that new compared with the time when these residences were built. So as we heard in previous conferences, we're talking more about the 4 seasons. It's important to have better accommodation. It's not just, let's go skiing and it doesn't matter if the accommodation is awful. People now want to have a real mountain experience, and the accommodation has to be of good quality. And just like everywhere else, the buildings have to adapt. They have to be renovated so that they are properly insulated and so that they don't use too many resources or energy. And today, real estate in mountains is getting scarcer. So it's important to build new residences, but also it's important to use the pool of existing residences. They need to be upgraded first So their value needs to be enhanced. So the idea is to move towards use over the 4 seasons, something that offers more quality, more comfort, and something that offers new features. It's not about just sleeping there, it's about finding different services. It's about using your accommodation better. It's about having something that's more like your own flat or home. So the difficulty that can be encountered when it comes to renovating mountain buildings is the co-ownership status. When it's a co-ownership, it's very difficult for decisions to be made that are satisfactory for all of the owners, and therefore to start investments. Not everybody has the same means, resources or objectives for the building. And this is one of the obstacles to renovation of these structures. So the idea was to start an approach that was based on an a la carte view. So something that can be, so different works that can be chosen so that some co-owners can go further, and so that the renovation can have different parameters that can be set differently according to the owners. I'll go into details of that a little bit later on. Now, one of the first systems that we offered, well, let me just point something else. We weren't alone. We were not the only architects. There were 2 architectural agencies. We were associated with Tectonic, and we also worked with design and development offices, people focusing on carpentry and environmental quality. So the 3 challenges of renovation listed by the PEB so the wood excellence cluster was the overall qualification of the building envelope, so the improvement of its quality in terms of thermal protection, but also its image, because that helps with a long-term attractiveness of buildings. And the uses as well are important. It was also important to focus on shared spaces, not just individual accommodation, but all of the transitional spaces. So between outside and inside, for example, there are spaces. And the third subject was to find out whether we could densify these buildings and work higher up or extend them. And one of the systems that was put forward was a facade extension. So this is a system that was proposed based on something that was prefabricated. It's like a plug-on, something that you add to the facade simply by plugging it on. So you've got a modular system made of wood, and it's what you can see here on the screen, with trellis 3D beams. And on those beams, you can then add a new envelope, a new shell. So what we're seeing here is the original facade with big bay windows and then balconies. And the main structure is based on concrete. So we can use the concrete structures and as a support for the extended beams in order to extend the facade. You can see that there's a cantilever effect and that we go even beyond the balcony. So it's only the trellis beams that are used as support beams. So we can then add a new floor and a new ceiling. And the owner can choose to have 2 balcony modules side by side, or to have the whole facade extended, or just to have little plugs according to the wishes of the co-owner. So the idea is to move the bay window where it was initially. This means that you're gaining 3 meters in terms of depth, and so you're increasing the internal surface of the building. And it means that then you've got a new balcony on the facade of the building. Then the epiderm is added. And as we will see this, the parameters for this can be set. It can either be chosen at co-ownership level or by each individual co-owner. They can personalize, customize what they want. So we worked on improving indoor comfort. We focused on the adaptable aspect of the housing with lots of mobile furniture, beds that can be put up into the wall, furniture that can be adapted and moved around so that the geometry of the habitat is variable. So it can be for a couple, but it can also be for grandparents with their grandchildren. So the accommodation can have multiple uses. So let's do a virtual tour of this project. So it's a research and development project, but it's based on a real building. And this is called the Résidence des Aravis, the Aravis building. So this is the initial project, such as it stands today. So before. So let me just get to grips with the technical aspects. Okay, no, let's do this differently. There we are, after. So we can move around, and so you can see what the idea is. I should be able to show you the before and after at the same time. So this is what I was saying. These are the plugs. Each owner can have the plug that it chooses, so you can group them together or isolate them. So group them together in twos, and this makes up a facade that's not necessarily uniform, although there is an overall kind of identity that's homogeneous. So you can really redesign the identity of the residence. This makes it more regional looking with the use of wood. And on the last floor, this is a floor where sloping roofs have been added. So this kind of takes the building away from this monolith aspect that you can see in the before picture. So we also worked on the shared spaces. So we're using wood again for the finishing material. So with a real reception area, a transitional area between the outside, the snow and the inside. So with a lobby space or waiting areas. So this offers a different experience when you enter the residence. Let me try and go back now. Sorry about that. There we are back at the facade. We've also planned on installing a system of lockers so that in the common space people can come and put their skis away, their ski boots, their bicycles as well, possibly. So this is what we've suggested. So using the extension that I mentioned with the balconies, so this time it's an extension that covers the entire facade. So we've got the extension on the ground floor here. So this provides storage areas for bicycles. It also provides an area that can be used for rental spaces. The cellars are not very well used at the moment. So it would involve a reorganization and restructuring of the ground floor. So adding different improvements for the shared space. So if you want to browse the site, you will find all of the details about this research project. So let me come back to the individual residences, the individual units. So this is the existing housing unit, and this is the dwelling redeveloped. So you can see the before and after. So this is the before, so this is where you have the facade with the bay window, the balcony just after that, and then afterwards you can see that the plug has extended the dwelling, providing additional space. So the bay window was here before. So we're looking at gaining 6 square meters per dwelling with this extension. We have to have a step here because it's important to provide insulation. So all of that additional thickness is insulated, but you can make it into a mini living room. So it kind of requalifies the inside of the apartment. So that's an apartment with 2 bedrooms, but it's something that applies to the furniture. So the furniture can be modular, so you can have spaces for luggage, you can have a space for additional beds. It's modular. And that's for the entrance part of the apartment. So let me just go back. So in this dwelling, we also worked on the nighttime area. So different interior design based on wood. So this changes the space. It lends it a kind of the feeling of living in the woods. It's also makes it much warmer, this indoor space. Let me talk about the rooftop now. So we wanted to offer something for the roof based on an atypical extension, a quite unusual extension that offers it a new experience. So it's a bit like the small houses on the roof that I showed you earlier on. So the idea is to duplicate these modules, but also to build a hall that covers the roof with different partitions. So with glass-covered partitions, so it depends on the project. So you can offer new uses, so a play area for children, for example, but also, why not, a greenhouse. Why not have a greenhouse? Why not have a big room for different activities, a reception area, somewhere for evening activities, somewhere for the children when they're on holiday. So this is the room here. That can be on top of the building, on the roof, a rooftop room. So you can see that everything is made of wood, the structure is made of wood. And it's something that can be installed very quickly. So between 2 winter seasons, it's possible to add this to facilitate work. It's something that can be done in the summer season. It uses know-how that is pretty much available in the mountains. So we heard about the wood sector in the Rhône-Alpes region from my colleague. So that's the Renova Seam project. If you want to find out more, there's a little booklet that's available. You can pick it up from the chairs at the front. There's the renovation booth just behind you as well. And you can use a virtual headset to go round the building to do the virtual tour of the building. There we are. So please feel free to ask any questions if you have any. If there are any questions, we can use a microphone. So we're obviously very clear and efficient. Thank you for these testimonials and for the virtual tour. We're going to continue now. Anyway, it's certainly something that we can dream about. Okay, if there are no questions, we can thank Benjamin and Sarah for their presentations. And perhaps Emeline can take you on the virtual tour. She's just behind. So please feel free to test the virtual tour. Thank you for listening.